Okay, I'm going to make a start on the webinar. So thank you everybody for attending. My name is Lindsay Williamson. I'll be going through the 75k update webinar for you. So I'm one of the adoption and loyalty consultants for Docman. We've got a few items on our agenda. I'm just going to go through each one as we go through the webinar. You may have already noticed that this is a listen-only webinar, so you can hear me but I can't hear you. Just on this little screen that you've got on the right there where you joined onto the webinar, you've got a little questions section. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, just pop your questions in the little questions box and I'll answer them either throughout the webinar or I'll answer them at the end of the webinar. Hopefully we'll be able to get through all the questions that people have answered. It's sort of like a Q&A session that we'll have at the end of frequently asked questions. So I know a few more people said they were going to attend, but they will just join on as we go along. It's not going to cause any disruption to us or anything like that. So hopefully everybody will be able to see my blue Docman screen now. Can I just get a little bit of a heads up on that questions box to say that you can see my screen and hear my voice? Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much everybody. Okay, I'll make a start then. Okay, so the first thing I'm actually going to show you is how to update your Docman system. So not everybody knows how to update the system. If you do, then that's absolutely fantastic. 75,000 will just come through as an update, as all the other updates have done. There's no charge involved with this. It's the GP stock release of Docman. So to be on the GP stock framework, we have to give our system certain requirements. So for you to be on this GP stock, you've got to be on this version basically. We're trying to get as many people on as possible. At the moment, it's not available to every practice. It has been rolled out to a few practices, but they're not rolling it out to everybody, just so they can smooth everything out first, really. So how to update your Docman system? You need to be on your Docman server, and I'd say probably leave yourself about an hour, just so you can update the system with enough time to spare if anything were to go wrong. You can call somebody about it. So this is my Docman server. The first thing you need to do is close down a few icons that you may have running. So these will be down in your system intro down at the bottom there. So this little icon here is your Docman scheduler. You need to close that down when you run through your update. So you just right click that icon and you go to shut down scheduled tasks. So you need to ensure that that is closed down or else the update won't run through. And shut down again and it'll close the scheduler off. The other icon that you need to close down, and I'm actually going to go to my little arrow, is this little traffic light icon there. So everybody will have that traffic light icon. It's your backup there. And again, you just need to right click onto that icon and stop auto backup. If that little traffic light icon isn't there, then don't worry about it. You'll be able to run through your update. But again, make sure that them two icons are closed down and then you can start your update. So on your Docman server, you will have a little icon in there called Docman Admin or Docman 7 Admin if you're not on the latest version yet. Double click onto that icon and you'll get a little screen popping up there, a start mode screen with number 1 automated backup, or that may say service control manager, but it doesn't matter what number 1 says because we're going to click onto number 2, system administration. Then it will ask us to log in to the admin module. So you can either use the admin account, which is what our support desk use, and it's the full the account that's got the full administration rights really. But if you've got your practice manager there, or you are the practice manager, and you've got full admin rights for Docman anyway, you will also be able to use your Docman credentials to log into this. So when you have logged on, it will take you to the system administration module screen. So as I said earlier, nobody can be logged into the Docman system while you run the update through. If you have got people still logged in, and you can actually click onto configure workstations just on the left there, can click onto the little icon to see if anybody is actually logged on. So in this list, in this screen, sorry, you'll have a list of all the computers that have got Docman registered to them. And you've got a little column there called logged in. So you'll be able to look down all of their registered computers. And if you can see that little dash next to all the computers, that basically means nobody's logged into the system. If you do see people on, you can either go tell them, you need to come off of Docman, I'm just about to run an update, but let's say that they've locked the computer and they've gone on a lunch. When you run through the updates, it will just kick them off anyway. So once you're absolutely certain that everybody's off and you can run the update through, you've got a little option here called check for new updates. That may say, and it may be in orange if the backup's downloaded the updates for you, that may say process available updates. If it says process available updates, that basically means there is definitely an update there and it will definitely run through. But check for new updates, so if I click on my check for new updates, for example, my system hasn't downloaded any updates for me to install. So now it's going to check to see if there is any that need to be downloaded. So my system comes up with your system is currently up to date. I need to show you how to run through 75,000. So I can't show you the full update process, but all that would happen is a little box would appear saying all users must be logged off in order to run the update. You click yes on that message and your screen will actually turn white, and all you've got to do is press a little button at the bottom called verify and it will run the update through for you. As I say, because my system's currently up to date, I want to navigate you to this little web page that I've got open at the bottom. The web page is www.docman75000.com. So it's quite handy. For one, it shows you how to update Docman. So these are the screens I haven't been able to show you. So system administration, you log into Docman. So this is when it comes up with process available updates. I'll check for new updates. So if Docman does notify that there is something to be downloaded, it will start downloading the update. Although it might come up with currently up to date like it did for me. But this is the little screen it may pop up with to say that all users must be logged off. Do you wish to do this now? And this is the screen that will come up, and all you've got to do is press verify down at the bottom. So if you haven't run an update before, and for anything else to do with 75,000, this is the best page to go to. So as I said earlier, it is docman75000.com. Okay. So I'm going to minimise that down to the bottom because that's quite a handy page to go onto if you want to refer back to 75,000. Okay, I'm going to close off of that just to let you know anything that you have shut down at the beginning of the update, when the update's finished, it will automatically load these icons back up for you. So it's not something you've got to load back up yourself, it will do it for you. Okay, so I'm actually going to log into my Docman system now. So if I double click onto my Docman icon, if you've been on an earlier version, these icons may look a little different now. We rebranded a little while ago from Docman 7 to just Docman. There's no numbers involved with it anymore now. But your icons may change, and it will change on all of the computers for you, but the same concept will apply. You double click onto Docman and it will ask you to log into the system. Now I'm going to come back to this login screen in just a second because it's the biggest feature of 75,000 is single sign-on. But there's a few more things I just want to show you before I go into single sign-on. So I'm just going to log in as the admin account again. So this is one of the screens that will appear every time you log into the system, a Computer Misuse Act, and this was one of the requirements for us to be on the GP SOC framework. And as I say, it appears every time you log into the system. I mean, one of the questions that I've had in recent webinars is there any way to take this screen off, but unfortunately there isn't. You either have to press close message or you can hit enter on your keyboard, as I've just done there. and again it'll take you to your Docman screen. I'm just going to get rid of a few screens there, so you won't normally appear for you. But for those customers who have already been on this blue screen, there aren't that many changes in terms of the interface, whereas if anybody's still on the white Docman screen and you update, this is what your screen is going to look like. For those who may be on an earlier version, we are going to be running through some webinars next month on how to update from your white version, a white menu, sorry, to this blue menu, so it'll just be a little bit easier rather than trying to do it yourself. We'll point out all the differences for you basically. Okay, so that was the computer misuse act. So I'm going to show you single sign-on. How single sign-on is going to work is all you will have to do, I'll just close out of there. So this will only work with EMIS web practices and IMPS vision practices. So every morning when you come into the practice, you would double click onto your clinical system icon, which may be EMIS or IMPS vision. And then you log in with your smart card, or you may use credentials, and that's absolutely fine. You carry on doing that on your clinical system side. But once you've logged onto the clinical system, all you've then got to do is double click onto Docman, and it will look at who is logged onto the clinical system and log that same person in on your Docman system. But there's a little bit of setup that needs to be done before you turn single sign-on on. When you update to 75,000, single sign-on will be turned off by default, and that's because you've got to do a little bit of setup first. Now, my demo Docman system isn't linked to any clinical system, so I'll let you know why that is in just a second. So if I just double click onto my Docman, so this is what you would do to activate single sign-on once you've updated to the latest version, 75,000. Log into Docman with an administrator's password, or like I say, if you are an administrator, you can log in as your own password there as well. You then need to go to settings. We then need to go to maintain lists. I'm going a little bit slower, so if anybody's making notes, they can make notes. I think we're going to publish this video onto the website though, so do keep your eye out for it if you want to refer back to it. We're then going to go to users. So as I explained earlier, it will look at who's logged onto the clinical system. So what we need to do, and this will be the exact same thing in your practice, you've got a list of all your Docman users in Docman, and then you've got a list of all your clinical users in your clinical system. So what we need to do is link them users up together with one another. So Dr. Daniel Smith Docman account needs to be linked up with the, let's say EMIS web as an example. Dr. Daniel Smith, the Docman account needs to be linked up with the EMIS web Dr. Daniel Smith account. So to do that, you would double click onto Dr. Daniel Smith. You've got a little option in there called clinical user. Click the little arrow just next to it there. And as I say, my system isn't linked up to any demo system, so it's not going to give me the list, but it will for you guys. As I say, this is what I was saying before. But in this list here, you will have a list of all the users from your clinical system. So there's your Docman user, Dr. Daniel Smith. You go find Dr. Daniel Smith in this list, click his name and press select. And then the clinical user, Dr. Daniel Smith, and the Docman user, Dr. Daniel Smith, are linked up together. But you need to do that for every user in this list. So Dr. Docman needs to be linked up with clinical user Dr. Docman. Dean Smith needs to be linked up with Dean Smith, clinical user. You need to set it up for everybody that would even just need to access a letter, not just workflow. It's for logging into Docman to view any letters or to use workflow as well. Once you've linked up all of your users in that list, I'll close out of that maintain list screen and go back to the settings screen that we were in before. We need to go to administer system. Again, I'm just going to go a little bit slower so people can make the notes. and it'll take you into the admin module as we did when we updated the system, but this time we're going into the top option, configuration and integration. We then have a little option in there called user system preferences. In there we have security. If you double click onto security, it'll drop down a few more options for you. And you can see there, use single sign-on. Setting must be Y or N. At the minute it's set to N for no, it's not switched on. All you would do is change that to an uppercase Y. Click on to save. Close that screen down. Well, once it's turned on, just close everything down and just test that it works really. I mean, when I've set this up for practices in the past, when 75,000 first came out, it was probably better for nobody to be logged onto the system first. I don't think it's a problem if people are logged onto the system, but it just gives you a chance to say, right, well, we'll test it out now. If you're a big practice, it might be worth just sort of briefing everybody to say, look, if you log into the clinical system first and then log into Docman, you won't be asked to put in any credentials in Docman, it will just log you on. So as I said before, now that we've linked up all of our Docman users to our clinical users and we've turned single sign-on on, all you would have to do is open up your clinical system using your smart card or using credentials. It doesn't matter either one if you don't have your smart card on you. But then all you've got to do is double click onto Docman. It will look at the user that's logged onto the clinical system. So it's not looking at your smart card, or it's not looking at the password for the user on the clinical system. It's just looking at that user account. So that is how your single sign-on works. Another little, very small interface change, so you can see there, unable to single sign on because I don't have my clinical system on, so the only user that can log in without having a single sign on is the admin account. So you see how that's greyed out now? So only that account will be able to log on once you've got single sign on switched on. And that's more for our support desk if they need to log on and check something, if you've got a problem. Okay. Just on the right, I think they may be changing a few things with the news feed. So before you had a list of links that it would take you to your Docman website for any case studies or webinars that may have come out. They've changed them screens very slightly just so it's a sliding news feed. So it's a tile saying this has happened in Docman, we're releasing new webinars, sort of the same things that you had before. But as I say, it's just a sliding page now rather than a list of links in there. So that's a very, very small change there. Another thing that they've incorporated with 75,000 is a privacy officer. So when you update to 75,000, by default the admin account will be your privacy officer. And the privacy officer is the person that would receive notifications if a document was deleted. And I'll show you a few good things with that, because it allows you to retrieve the document back if it was deleted by accident and you've not printed it out or anything like that. So, first thing you need to do is set up your privacy officers, and I'll show you how the notifications work. So, again, go to your settings option, go into maintain lists, and the first thing to probably do is give people the permission to look at privacy officers. So yourselves if you're practice managers, or maybe others if you want them to manage who is a privacy officer and who isn't a privacy officer. So if I go into Dean, for example, double click onto his name, go over to security. On this permissions list, if I just scroll right to the very bottom, you've got a little option in there called maintain privacy officers. You just need to set that to a yes and save. And what they will have the next time they log in, they've got to log out and log back in for the change to take effect. On this settings screen that we've been in and out of, you've got another tile in there called Privacy Officer. So as I said before, your default Privacy Officer will be the admin account. And you see how you've got a little add remove option in there. So if you say, right, if I click ads, I want these to be a privacy officer. And you can have more than one privacy officer, so I'll choose Dr. Docman. Dr. Docman's already a privacy officer. I'll choose Dr. Daniel Smith as a privacy officer as well. And you can take people off there just by using the remove button if you think it's necessary. So once you've got your privacy officer set up, I'm just going to click back to go to my main menu. If somebody was to delete a document, the privacy officers, if you have got more than one, will receive a notification, and that notification will appear in the notifications centre. If you don't have that on your screen, it might mean, just very quickly go back into settings, you've got a little menu editor here. And go into the menu editor, it might have been that the notification centre was taken off of the screen. Go into the menu editor, allow you to add it back in. If we go to the notification centre, it's not really been used for much in Docman, so this is one of the big things that's been changed with the notification centre. So I've got a few notifications in there. You'd normally clear them off once you've read them, but I've kept these in here for the webinars. So a document for patient Miss Minnie Mouse of 1st of May 1991 has been deleted by Dr. Docman for the following reason: wrong patient on the 16th of July at 1:30. If I double click onto that notification, I've got there, again, just the same details of what it's just told me in the notification. But then you have, what do you want to view? Do I want to view the patient? If you click patient, it will just take you into the patient's record that it was deleted from. Do I want to view the document? And this is one of the good things about the privacy officer. This will actually give you the document that was deleted in the first place. So from there, you can either print the letter out to rescan back on, or you can import it into Docman if you don't want to print it out. The final option in there is the audit trail, and that just lets you see the audit of the document of what actually happened with it before it got deleted. You can see it was filed, it was viewed, so this is just a test document, so there's not really much to it. But it'll tell you if it's been to any other doctors, if a comment's been made, etc. So that's one of the big things for the privacy officer, being able to get the documents back once they've been deleted, which we've never really been able to do before without going into the database. So that's quite a good feature of 75,000 there. Okay, the next parts I'm going to go on to is just a few changes in file documents. So anything to do for the scanners and in IntelliSense. There aren't that many changes with IntelliSense, but there are a few good key ones in there. So if I just go into file documents, the first thing you will notice is that the interface of the batch manager has changed in itself. Not the entire screen, but just down this left hand side here. So when you scan things on, if you've got your auto name on your batches, it will just come up as scanned, as it did before, with how many pages you've got in there. You can still rename your batches by right clicking and renaming, but you will see, so this one's got 48 pages for example, where it used to say page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, etc. You'll just have little thumbnails now. Now, one of the changes that they're popping in there is just to have a little border around the thumbnail, because a few people have said it's not as noticeable as it was before. To say there's page 1, page 2, page 3, especially if you've got blank pages in there, so that's the second page. I wouldn't have noticed that without hovering over it. So that's one of the changes that they're going to be popping in there if people have already updated 75,000 and they're struggling with the same thing. So that is in the pipeline. It'll also tell you who scanned that batch on as well. So it was Dr. Docman that scanned this on, and it was scanned on the 17th of July. But you would still use your scan button like you have already been doing. Anybody that receives electronic documents, just to very quickly show you the changes in there, the tags on the documents, they used to appear down at the bottom, but now they just appear at the top. So very simple, the same concept applies, so you can still reject them and clear them off. So in terms of the batch manager, like I say, it's more just interface. There's a few background changes, but it's not something that's really going to concern you guys as GP practices. So for IntelliSense, again, some people may not be using IntelliSense, but I'm just going to show the changes for those who are using IntelliSense. So if I just click File Document, okay, so the IntelliSense screen itself, again, hasn't changed that much. There's just few little changes in terms of it doesn't highlight the text blue anymore, it highlights it in green, so it just makes it a little bit more noticeable, that's all. The patient that is found, again, that highlights in green at the top as well. So, and what I tend to tell practices when they're using IntelliSense is when you click File Document, check this patient up at the top there, and if that patient matches the patient on the letter, then you're good to go. You can check all of your other details over on the left and then continue on that page. One of the quite good things that we've popped in here, just go down to Options, you've got Show Original Document. So rather than seeing this text version of the letter, because sometimes it is quite hard to read, you can go to Show Original Document, and it will just give you the original document. So when you're checking everything, so Miss Minnie Mouse, yes, it is Miss Minnie Mouse, 2nd of January, yes, it is the 2nd of January, whereas the text version, once you get used to it, it's not so bad, but it's just generally easier looking at the document itself rather than the text version of the letter. Okay, I'll just continue on that page. So the final screen itself, there's not really any changes with there. With IntelliSense, it's still the same concept. You can put more details in there if you wanted to. You've got this little workflow tick box down at the bottom, workflow the document. So again, I'm going to keep that ticked because there's a few key changes in the workflow that have taken place as well. So if I just click File Document again, so it'll still come up asking, checking to see if it's a duplicate document. That's still exactly the same though. View if it's already on the patient's record, or File Anyway if you know it's different. So your workflow templates will appear, so this is what that little list, not everybody's got workflow templates set up, but if you do, this is what it will appear like, and it's still the same concept, so you just choose which doctor you want, and it will take you to your workflow screen. So this is iWorkflow, bearing in mind the changes with 75,000. The only little thing that they've popped in here, well, the little thing, it's the workflow due date. So you can now set due dates on the documents. So when we go to people's in-trays, it will say that it is due on the 30th of July. When it becomes overdue, it turns red, and it will actually turn the tile, the workflow tile, in red as well, kind of like how it has up at the top there for me. So what I've actually done with my workflow template, if I just click the Apply Template up there, I've incorporated into these workflow templates that anything that gets sent to Dr. Docman, for example, needs to be done within 7 days. And you can change that number as well if you want to. So if you say, well, that needs to be done within 14 days, and if the doctor knows that he's going to be off for a couple of days, you can actually change the workflow due date as well if you want to. But apart from that, there's not many changes with the iWorkflow screen. If I just click on the little arrow next to workflow due date, you can manually change that yourself if you wanted to. So you can say, right, yeah, I know he's on holiday, but it still needs to go to him. I'll give him a couple more weeks. So he's got 28 days now until he can finish this workflow. Send, and it still sends it away. Takes it out of the. Sorry about that. Finish. There we go. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so I'll go on to the workflow screen just to show you how it will appear for the doctors anyway. So if I just close out of the batch manager and go into the workflow icon, so I'm logged in as Dr. Docman at the moment, so I've got 23 documents in my workflow. Tile is red, which basically means there's something in my workflow that is either urgent or it's overdue, and you can see there it's just changed to 24 because I've just sent myself another letter. If it's a normal green colour, like the notification centre, that means that everything in my workflow, nothing's overdue and nothing's urgent, it's just normal letters that have appeared in my workflow. If I go to my workflow, there's a few differences in what's urgent and what's overdue. So anything urgent will have a little exclamation mark next to it, and they will be at the top of the list as well, so that's how you know that they're urgent letters. Also, over in the yellow box it will say this is a high priority workflow as well. You can see that you've got another column in the workflow box there, and that will just tell you when the document's overdue. So this one is due on the 20th of August, but it is still an urgent workflow, so that realistically wouldn't have a due date on it, or it'd have a due date of 1 or 2 days maybe. Anything that says NA, so it's got no exclamation mark, it's not in red, it basically means it doesn't have a due date, it's not overdue and it's not urgent, it's just a normal letter that's been sent to the doctor. But anything that's in red there is overdue, so this was due on the 10th of July, but they haven't appeared at the top of my list, so that's how you differentiate what's an overdue letter and what's an urgent letter. Whereas anything else, it either doesn't have a due date on it, or the due date hasn't been reached yet. So he's got a lot of overdue work in there. If he wants to change the workflow due date, all he's got to do is press F6. Press F6, it will take you to the workflow screen that we had earlier, and they can just go change during 39 days. They can change to say what needs to be done in a couple of days. No, not there, that's too early, isn't it? Save, and it's just changed the due date there for me. It's still in red because it's still an urgent workflow though. Okay. I think from the overdue, the workflow and the overdue, the workflow and the due dates, that's pretty much it in terms of the workflow screen. I mean, I am actually going to go into IntelliSense coding because there's a few changes in there as well, which is quite handy to know. So again, not everybody may be using IntelliSense coding, but I think we're going to be releasing some more webinars on how to file letters with IntelliSense and how to read code letters with IntelliSense. So in this webinar I'm just going to show the changes with 75,000, but if you want to know more about IntelliSense coding and read coding, filing and coding, just keep your eye out for any more webinars that may come out. So if I go to summarise up at the top there, so if you want to read code letter, you would click onto summarise at the top. And with IntelliSense read coding, I'm going to click the text diagnostic. I'm going to read through the letter and try to find any diagnostic codes for me. Now the list at the top there will basically read through the letter and try giving you any possible matches it can find off the letter. Now the change with 75,000 is any read codes that come up in blue basically mean that they're your preferred terms from the clinical system. And all the way down that list it will just point out the blue codes for you. So the ones that maybe, you know, if it's found nasal polyp at the top there and it's got one underneath in blue, I'd more than likely go to the blue one because that's the one that's your preferred term from the clinical system. If I just click add read code from term browser, blue codes will also appear in here as well. So if I type in asthma, because some people may be just adding things in manually, but if you are adding read codes in manually, again blue codes will appear to say that these are your preferred terms from the clinical system. And that's pretty much it for the IntelliSense coding changes. There's not really anything else that's changed in there. Okay. Okay, so there's just a couple more changes now, but I'm just going to show you how to set them up really, and that'll make sense when I show you what's actually changed. So there's always been a section in workflow, in iWorkflow should I say, where you can bulk reroute a number of letters from one person to another person, but that was only, you have to move everything over from that one person to the other person, so it's quite hard in the fact that, you know, if you wanted to keep a couple of letters with the other person, you couldn't, you had to manually forward every single letter if that was the case. But to both move the letters, if you go to manage, you've got a little option in there called move workflows. And the same concept applies if anybody's been using this before, and it's worth for everybody to know how this works because it's really handy piece of kit to use if the doctor's off sick or someone's gone on holiday and you need to move all the work from one to another. If I just click Dr. Daniel Smith, so I'm picking up all them 5 workflows that he's got, but this was one of the changes with 75,000. You can see there, just over on the right, so these ones have been asked for opinion and there's an action required, so them 2 I'm actually going to keep with Dr. Daniel Smith, but the other 3 I want to be moved over to another person. I'm going to keep them 3 ticked, select them, and I'm going to place them to Dr. Docman. Are you sure you wish to move workflows from Dr. Daniel Smith to Dr. Docman? Yes, I am. And it'll ask you again, are you really sure you wish to move these workflows? If you do click yes at this point, you've got to, the only way to get them back over to Dr. Daniel Smith is to do a database restore. So you want to click, you want to be absolutely certain that you're moving over the right thing there. And it will actually now give you a list of reasons that you can choose from of why you're moving all this work from that person to that person. And you can actually create this list yourself, so that's what I meant about setting these couple of features in there. So my users are, user is on holiday, user is sick, wrong doctor. So I'm going to choose wrong doctor. In-tray moved successfully, moved 3 workflows. So now, if I went back to my documents list, shows, yeah, so I only had about 4 urgent workflows before, but now I've got about 7 workflows in there that are urgent. And they come from Dr. Daniel Smith. Another little change that they've got in there, I'm going to show you how to set this list up in just a second, but it's worth knowing about this one too, because it's a similar setup. So when you go to delete documents, just very quickly going back to the privacy officer, it was giving me reasons, so wrong patient, duplicate, wrong patient, entered in error. When you go to delete a document now, and this was one of the GP soft requirements, you've got to put a reason on why you're deleting that document. And again, you can create the list that you want to say user entered in error, wrong patient, etc. So if I just bring up one of my patients, and I just go to delete a document, exactly the way that you've been deleting before, absolutely no change in there, you still delete from the clinical system as well. So okay, this is the same list that came up before when we was moving workflows, duplicate document, user error, wrong patient, or you can actually press other reason. So if I click other reason in this case, it lets you type something in yourself. So, wrong patient. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do now is show you how to set these lists up yourself for deleting document reasons and moving workflow reasons as well. So go back to your Docman main menu. You have a little options in settings. Administer system. The same place where we went to do single sign-on, if you've already wrote it down, that is. So the exact same place. Administer system, configuration and integration, user system preferences, but instead of going into security, we're going into settings this time. Got a little option in there called bulk reroute reason and then document delete reason. So these are the lists that I've got at the moment, so you can see that they're all up at the top there. It says enter multiple reasons using a pipe delimiter. Now a pipe delimiter, that little icon in the middle just there, the best way of doing this is to hold down your shift key and press the backslash key on your keyboard. So hold down shift, press backslash, and it'll put in the pipe delimiter. It's the icon above the backslash. So user on holiday, pipe delimiter, and no spaces as well, just carry on typing, user this. So this is for the bulk reroute reason. Click save, and the next time you go to bulk reroute documents, it will give you this list instead. For them changes to take effect though, just make sure you log out and you log back into the system, and you'll get that new list that you've created. Document delete reason, exact same process, but you need to put in reasons on why a document may get deleted. So duplicate document, a user error, wrong version, and there may be more reasons that you have, but you would just type them in there for your surgery. As soon as you set them up for on one machine, it sets them up for all, so everybody uses the same list there. And apart from that, they're the key changes with 75,000. As I said, this web address is really handy to go into. If I just very quickly go to Docman 75,000 video guides, so single sign-on is probably the biggest thing with 75,000, so we've got a few documents on that. There's a little video there for linking Docman and clinical users together, so the thing that I was doing at the beginning where I was going into Dr. Daniel Smith and linking it up to the clinical user, that video will actually show you, I'm not going to go into it because it'll start talking to me, but it will show you the little list that you get at the end. So if I just press this report there again. So the little, when you double click onto the user, and you've got to go into the clinical user, as it says there, but instead it's going to give you a list of users. So this is what didn't appear on mine, but you would just link it up to the clinical user that you had before. There's a little voice in the background as well, so it's one of our colleagues helping you through how to do this, how to set up the single sign-on. And then another little video just showing you how to turn it on. So exactly what I showed you at the beginning, but in a video for you, so absolutely brilliant if you want to go ahead with single sign-on. Another website which can be quite handy for everybody to use is www.docmanhealth.com. Now this isn't based on just 75,000, it's based on everything. So if you want to look further into workflow or the summarizer or library apps, EDC, absolutely anything, you just click the options that you want for iWorkflow, and it will just talk you through how iWorkflow works. So actioning and completing the workflows. You've got screenshots, just a bit of description on how to use everything. It's really handy to use. So it's a really good website. It's quite new as well, so it could be quite handy at times if you're not using certain parts of the system. Right, I'm just going to go into a couple of the questions that people may have put in there. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to read some of them out there. Okay, a question here. Can you still log on with the old manual password if the system does not pick up the EMIS web logon? The only user that will be able to log on is the admin account. Hopefully, if you've got your clinical user and your Docman user linked up together, you just need to log on to the clinical system first, and then double click onto Docman, and it will recognise who's logged on. If you're having problems with that though, you can ring the support desk. The support desk number is 0844 967 0967. Hopefully you shouldn't get any problems in there though. The practices that I've seen have been absolutely fine. It's just worth testing it though before you go ahead with it. Okay, another question here. Are deleted documents completely deleted when you clear the deleted notification, or is it still on the system somewhere and retrievable? I believe if I just go to double click back onto my Docman, you can clear the notification off. I've never tried getting them back at all. Let's give it a try. Okay. So if I just clear that one there. Yes, so you've got a little option in there, show cleared items, and it will let you, let me try to find it. I think it'll be in there somewhere. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, you can clear them off, but you can still get them back, but they're not on the patient's record anymore, if that's what you was aiming at. If it's still somewhere on the clinical record, it's just for, I think it's just pointing to the part in the database to get that deleted document back, whereas before we never had that point. We just had to literally go into the database ourselves, and it weren't that easy to get it back. So it will be there, but not in a patient's record. Do you have to complete the workflow dates? I imagine you mean the workflow due date. As soon as you finish that workflow, the due date will be completed. But just another point on that, you don't have to use due dates on workflows. It's not a necessity. If you think, well, I don't want to change the due dates, you just don't use them. So another question that's popped up there, I am going to go back onto some of the other questions in there, is how do you change a due date to no date? So all you've got to do, when you, again, update to 75,000, you won't have a due date on there. I mean, my system is currently set up, so it has got a due date on. But when you update to your systems, it won't have the due date on there. So I'll just very quickly go through here. Okay, so you can just delete that out for one. Oh, I'll let me delete mine out. Oh yeah, there it is. The no due date has been assigned to this workflow, and that's the screen that will appear for you unless you go in and actually give the workflow a due date. So, sorry to I didn't really point that out before. You don't have to use due dates if you don't want to. When will we be able to download 75,000? So again, it's just available to a couple of practices first, but eventually it's going to be rolled out to everybody. So I'm hoping it's going to be sometime this month, if not next. The support desk have had a few calls about 75,000, so they're just working on them issues first before they release it out to everybody. Okay, very good question here. Will we be notified that we are switching to 75,000, or do we just check for updates on a regular basis? Okay, so on your Docman main menu, I'll just very quickly go back here. You've got a little tile up at the top there called well, mine says PCTI Engineers, but yours will say your practice name. That little icon will turn green, quite like how my notification centre has, and it'll say updates available. If you see that, that means 75,000 has been downloaded, and you've got to go install it like I showed you how to do at the beginning of the webinar. Okay, is there any way of retrieving a deleted EDT document before it is filed? I don't think there will be, no. I mean, if you do receive an EDT document, rather than deleting it, it's best to reject it if it's been sent from a hub, because that way you can just, the people who are monitoring the hub can just resend it back to you. Whereas if you delete it, it's deleted off your side and they don't have it anymore. They'll probably have it in their local folders over at the hospital, but it'll just take longer to come back. So rather than deleting EDT documents, it's better to just reject them. Alternatively, if it's come down NHS mail or anything like that, you just go into your NHS mail account and pick it up from there. There's a few ways. It depends on what EDT document it is that you've got there. So we've gone through all the questions that we've got in there. Another question that's just popped up then. When filing a document, we want to broadcast to all. So do we blob that or use iWorkflow? To read that again just for just a second. So when filing a document, we want to broadcast to all. So do we blob that or just use iWorkflow? So broadcast to all, as you already know, it sends the letter to everybody who you chose to send that letter to. Whereas iWorkflow, if you send that to a group of people, the first person to finish the letter will finish it for everybody. So I'd probably just use broadcast just for letters that you want everybody to see, really, rather than just. I'd suggest iWorkflow is a more efficient way to rotate letters around. But I still do sometimes go back to broadcast to all for anything that you put into library, like data protection acts and staff training guides and things like that. But clinical letters, I tend to say forward it to one person. If they want to forward it to other people, you can do just by pressing forward or using an action. Another question here, what is the summarise notification tab for? So, as I said at the beginning, there's not much that's been used for the notification. Is this what you mean down at the back there? Summarise notification tab. I'm not too sure what you mean by that there, so do you mean this one here? Yes. The summarise tab, so Docman will assume that every letter that is scanned in will need to be recoded. So in summarise, it gives you a list of all the letters that have been scanned on that day, and it just lets you go in and summarise them without them being in anybody's workflow. Or if there are in somebody's workflow, you can use that little tab there to go in and just recode them while they're sitting with everybody else. But if you've got, let's say, 500 odd letters from today and you've not been able to get through them all, tomorrow it's going to refresh because it's not looking at yesterday's letters, it's looking at today's letters. So a little bit hit and miss. It depends how many letters come back for recoding. If you can get them all done in a day, then I'd suggest using summarise. But if it's a lot, it's best to have a workflow tray to capture them all really. Okay, if anybody does have any more questions, you will get a little notification email tomorrow, just a little thank you email for attending the webinar. It'll ask you to fill in a survey monkey, so just to say how the webinar's gone, if it's actually helped you, have you understood it, that sort of thing really. You can reply to that email at training@docman.com. You can send an email to that account now if you like, it'll come through to myself if you've got any further questions about 75,000. So that's training@docman.com. But if everybody's okay with the webinar from there, thank you for attending. We have been recording this webinar today, so hopefully I'll try to get that onto the Docman website as well. But also do use the Docman75000.com page as well, because that's been quite a hit really. But thank you everybody for attending. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Send me an email if you do get stuck on anything. Thank you very much.